So as I mentioned at the start of the unboxing, this box is absolutely chock-a-block full of plastic parts. So we'll open up the bags here. So I'll set aside the box with the other sprues. They don't quite all fit on my little workbench at the same time. But we'll start off by having a look at the absolutely massive fuselage halves here. They're probably a good maybe 25-30 centimeters long each, so pretty big for an aircraft in 72nd scale. As you can see on the fuselage, there's some nice recessed panel lines. You've got the various access hatches and ports, emergency exits, the handles for getting up on the aircraft, and then the panel lines. So they're all quite nice. No riveting details or anything, but that's pretty complex. You don't get that in a lot of kits, so I'm pretty happy with the recessed detailing there. You've got the large sort of twin doors at the back here, a little bit of raised detail for some of the panels there, so nice to see a bit of variety in how they've been moulded. On the underside of the hull here, still got some more recessed panel lines all the way up to the top there, so that's all looking pretty good. The sprues themselves look really quite neat. There's not too much flashing to speak of. And I don't really see any ejector pin markings or anything in any nasty places. Inside, there's nothing really. There's a few areas to help line up the cockpit floor and some little areas for the windows to go in. A little bit of flashing on the edges of the windows there, but that's alright. You can easily clean that stuff up. And looks like some guide rails for the turrets there, which I'm surprised the instructions say to put in last. I would think you'd probably have to put them in before putting the halves together, but we'll see how it goes when we're actually building this thing. But you could always add a few ribbing in. I've done that with a lot of my kits, just using a bit of 1mm masking tape, just to add a bit of sidewall detail. And you could always scratch build the interior if you wanted to, because the Mariner did have a pretty big interior with a kitchenette and like a crew resting area in the middle here. But you probably won't see too much of it because the windows down the bottom are quite small. But anyways, nice detail on the fuselage there. Couple of small parts here. Believe that's one of the antennas, which again nicely molded, not any imperfections. Set of flaps here, they look quite nice as well, very nicely shaped, and again no real imperfections. Some of the finer parts here for the turret, I believe. There's a bit of flashing on that. I'll see if I can get that with the camera. Yeah. So that kind of excess plastic there, which will have to get removed, but still not too bad at all, especially considering it's an old Minicraft kit that they've reissued. Moving on to the other set of sprues here, which, where's the identifier on this one? This is Sprue B. So what we've got here is the floats, which you can see, some nice recessed panel details. Now these would be the Bombay doors, which recessed line in the middle there, but they've actually got a bit of detail on the underside here. But you've got a bit of corrugated detailing, which all looks really quite nice. Another little part here for the interior of the Bombay doors, again really nicely done. There's not really any flash in any of the delicate positions, and no ejector pin marks that I can see that are in bad spots. A couple of other small parts. This is the other side of the Bombay, which the detailing's on the other side. A lot of your turrets, and what looks like a covering for the nose there, with no windows, which is nice. We'll have to have a look at the clear parts because I believe the Australian Mariner used a particular one, so we'll have to see if it's there. Looks like a covering for one of the turrets there, which is good, so you can make the unarmed version. Looks like one of the large radomes, and this is the other one, so not a huge amount of detail, but the parts all look like they're correctly molded, and I can't really see any imperfections. This looks like one of the panels for the engineer's position. They have done some raised detailing on the inside of the dials, and some recessed detailing on some of the doors there, and all of the gauges themselves are recessed into the plastic, so that'll be a lot of fun to paint up and detail. Sadly, you probably won't see too much of it, but hey, at least you know it's there, and that's what's important. Here are your air intakes, so I was a bit concerned there might be some flashing on these ones, but it looks like they're all pretty good. The cover for the nose wheel, which looks like you'll have to have a bit of cleanup for these little ejector pins that have been attached to the sides there. Tiny bit of recessed detailing on the interior, or raised I should say, like a panel line there, but looks alright. We've got our main pilot's instrument panel, so I don't believe there's a decal included, so you'll have to paint the gauges by hand. You've got one of the vertical stabilizers here, or the tail, which has some nicely done access ports with some little riveting details and a fair bit of recessed panel lining, which all looks really nice. All of the pins seem to be in good shape, which is good. That'll help line up the rudders and make sure they work. Other side here, again, same story. There's no real imperfections, and the detailing looks quite nice. We've got another, what looks like a bunch of circuit breakers and boards for the engineer's position. Again, it's a mix of raised and recessed details, which will be a lot of fun to paint up. This is the floor for the nose wheel. So there's a bit of corrugated paneling there, which is probably to help the crew if they're walking over it not slip on the rounded sort of areas there. And here you've got your struts to attach the floats to the wing, which look pretty nice there. There's a little bit of flash on the edges of the parts there, but nothing really too much. You can easily clean that up if it gets in the way. Again, bit of recessed corrugated detailing on the interior of the landing gear bay for the nose wheel. That all looks pretty nice. A few other little bits and pieces around here for like the turret there, and one more little table for the engineer, which looks like it might be some throttle controls or something. And we've got two sets of these sprues here, which are for the landing gear, the engines, and a few bomb bay details, as well as some of the guns. So starting in this corner, some more of the engine air intakes. Again, they all look really nice. Landing gear, which is interestingly done. Rather than just having some recessed and raised details, I've actually got holes for the wheel hubs, which look pretty nice. They'll look really good when painted up. Now, with the engines, we've got two cylinder halves and then the sort of crankshaft cover goes on. Looks like there's only one included, which is this one here. So I'd say you can only make the R2800 model, but we'll talk a bit about that when I'm actually building it. Looks like one of the turrets assemblies there with a little bit of detailing for the interior there where the controls would be for the turret. Here's your cowlings there. They're pretty delicate, but they're probably a little bit thick. Some people might want to actually replace them with some polystyrene sheet or try and sand them down a little. But it's nice that they've included them in the open and the closed options there, so they look quite nice. Little bit of recessed detailing on the engine cowling there for some of the access hatches for maintenance. But otherwise not an awful lot of detail on that, but that looks pretty good. Fabric control surfaces here, they've done a little bit of detailing, so there's a recessed panel for the trim tab here, and the surface has been done up to have a little bit of a fabric texture, so it's pretty subtle, but that's pretty good still. A few more controls with raised details there for the engineer's position. Here are some of the radiator details, which are actually quite nicely done. I'll see if I can get the camera to show them. So a little bit of raised and sunken details on those will look really nice when painted up. One of the propellers here, you've got the 3-bladed option and the 4th blade here. Looks like one of the trim wheels for the pilots, some sort of strut which has some pretty nice detail there. Rudder fins, which are also fabric covered. Again, they've got a little bit of a fabric texturing on them, pretty subtle but still nice. The pilot's yoke, which is nice and cleanly molded there. Underside of the floats here, again there's some more recessed detailing, looks pretty nice. Machine gun here with the barrels and the sections to join them, and that must be the shaft that sort of goes in between them. Looks like on the inside here there is a pin to line that up with, so they should go together pretty nicely. One of the seats here, pretty basic, but it's at least it's nice and clean, and that ejector pin mark you see is in a pretty much invisible spot. You're not going to be able to see that from outside. Bit of the ribbing for the interior of the bomb bay there. Looks like a few other little struts and various parts. Some of the landing gear covers. Again, it's all really quite nicely detailed. The surface detailing is pretty good, and it's all nice and clean. There's not too much flashing, if any, and where there is flashing, it's pretty easy to clean up. Here's the slightly more detailed cushioned seats for the 4 crew members that are in the flight deck there. They all look really quite nice. Sort of raised cushion detailing there, which will be fun to paint up. And yeah, a few more rails there for the bombs. So this sprue looks pretty good. Oh, got landing gear here too before I forget. Looks like there is a little bit of a tread pattern on them, which is pretty nice. And yeah, they've actually drilled right through the plastic for the holes there. So that'll be really nice and deep and a lot of fun to paint up and detail there. So yeah, hopefully they fit together nicely. It looks like rather than just having 2 pins to line the wheels up with, they've actually got sort of a half-moon crescent rays on the inside, so you match those up together. So they should be quite nice and solid and very difficult to assemble wrong. Doesn't look like there's too much of a seam on them either, so they should clean up quite nicely. We've got the last set of sprues that are in the grey plastic, which is the wing halves. So we've got, this would be the lower wing halves with the hole here for the bomb bay. So on the surface, it's pretty similar to the control surfaces. There's some nice recessed panel lines and a few recessed access patches and that sort of thing. Looks like a cover here for the the landing lights there. These are your little areas to attach these struts to for the floats. There doesn't seem to be any flashing on it, and I can't see any nasty pin markings on the outside here. There'll probably be a couple on the interior, which we'll have a quick look at soon. But that looks really quite nice. And you can see here the sort of pivot joints that the elevators and the flaps here, which also have really nice recessed panel line detail, will attach to and be able to pivot off of. So they look really nice. Looks like there's a bit of sidewall detailing there for some ribbing for the interior of the bomb bay. Have a look on the other side there. Yeah, it looks all quite nice and good to paint up. I'll be very tempted to have the doors open. And again, you can see all the ejector marks are on the inside of the wing, which means they're out of sight and out of mind. Horizontal stabilizer, again, same story. Fair few recessed access hatches. Not an awful lot of panel line detailing on them, but that's okay. There might not have been too much there. Some of these struts here for the main landing gear, and I'm not sure what that part is. Probably, I think those are the machine guns for the nose turret, which you glue on. And you've got your ailerons here, which have a little bit of fabric detailing similar to the rudder and the elevator that we looked at. As for this part, I believe that's the fairing for the horizontal stabilizer that goes at the rear of the aircraft. So a bit of recessed detailing and looks like some sort of access hatch there, which all looks pretty nice. And the last sprue that we've got here that's in grey is the D sprue, and it is a few different parts here. We've got the upper surface of the wings, which, much like the underside, has really nice recessed detailing, a lot of access hatches for fuel and oil and all sorts of things. All of them looking really quite nice, and I don't see too much flashing on them. Looks like we've got a cover here for the landing gear, which I believe would mean that you can assemble it out of the box as the non-amphibious version, which will be really good. A few more flaps here, looks like that might be one of the elevators. Middle section of the wing, again it's the same story as the rest of the wings, really nicely done detailing. Looks like there's a little bit of an imperfection here on the edge. I don't know if you can quite catch it on camera, but it looks like there's a bit of a sort of bend in the plastic where it's sort of melted a bit away or warped a bit somehow. I'm not sure if that's intentional. There might have been on the Mariners, that sort of design, because it's on both sides and it looks like it's pretty much exactly the same. Or maybe it's just some old tooling or something to do with interior detailing on the bottom, but either way it's bent a little bit there, so it doesn't look perfect, but it doesn't look too bad either. And you got your cockpit floor here, not too much details, it's basically just the pins to help line up the various parts. Looks like the throttle quadrant, or maybe the throttles might have been on the roof, I'd say. They usually are in float planes, and this would be just looks like a trim wheel and that, so really nicely detailed there actually. The only part that's really got a lot of interior detailing on the underside would be the bomb bays, which are for the upper surface of the wings here. So I'd say perhaps the imperfections come from the parts moulded here, but they're not really too bad. Detailing's quite nice. You've got some ribbing as well as some raised corrugated texturing there, so all looks pretty nice on these parts. And finally we have the clear parts here. So they all look really quite nicely done. As you can see, they're perfectly transparent and there's not a lot of distortion if I run my finger under any of the parts. Even the really curved ones, they're really quite nicely done. So you've got your various turrets. This is for the nose. These would be for your ventral and your tail turrets. These might either be coverings, because I'll show you the Australian Mariner, because it was the transport version, they didn't actually have any turrets mounted on them. So the rear would have had a kind of clear covering at the back here, and the nose had a fairing with a few windows. And I've been keeping my eye out. It looks like this would be the front window with the fairing, so you can see the smaller windows at the front there, and that would go onto the nose. So it looks like that part's included, and I would say you could probably quite easily use this clear part for the turrets to fair them over and have the transparencies for the tail. So it looks like you've got all the parts out of the box, like I keep saying, for the Australian version, which is great. So yeah, more turret parts there. This might have been that part I wasn't quite sure of in the instructions. It's sort of like a clear one, and I think it might go on the hull. Maybe it's an inspection area for the landing gear or something, but I'm not entirely sure. We'll have to see when we're building it what it actually does. All of your windows here for the interior, and as you can see even from a distance, there's not really too much distortion through the windows at all, so they all look really nice. This looks like your landing lights, because they're a little bit more bulged, and there's a little bit of a sort of dot in the middle there, which you can try and paint up to see if you can make it look like a light. So as for the decals, there's not an awful lot to talk about really. These ones are not printed by Cartograph, which is unusual for Academy. They've usually been done by them, so hopefully they're good. That's more something you can assess when you're actually putting them on the model. However, given that I want to do the Australian version, I probably won't be using any of these except for maybe the common stencils for the propeller markings. For the most part, there's nothing really too complex and finely detailed. It's pretty much just the large roundels and then the serial numbers, which they all look pretty nicely done, so not sure what the jury is on these. A bit of a shame there's no decals for the cockpit panel. The exciting ones to me are these, which are the Australian markings. Pretty basic for the Mariner, basically just your roundels there. And there's a sort of white stencil here, and that's actually as a backing for the pin-up, which goes on the front there. Pretty cool, you don't get a lot of Australian kits. And the Martin was a pretty important aircraft, even though it wasn't operated in massive numbers. It was able to supply all of the Pacific Islands we were fighting on and keeping our air bases supplied. But anyways, that's the decals. Let's wrap this up and I'll give my thoughts and conclusions on this kit before it's been assembled. The other thing I forgot to mention is you also get a pre-cut mask sheet. You can basically just pop them off and mask up your canopy with no worries. And SMS Paints have also released a set of paints to go with the Mariner. I don't use them just because I don't airbrush. I didn't really want to review them since I wouldn't be able to give much of a good opinion, but a lot of other people have shared their love for SMS, so they sound like a really great brand. If you do a lot of airbrushing and you want to do this kit, then you can grab that at the same time. So, what do I think of this kit? Well, so far, after having a look at it, I have to say I'm a really big fan of this kit. It retails for around about $50 to $60, which for the level of detail and the size of this aircraft, I think is an absolute bargain. The details are really nice, especially in the cockpit and the bomb bays. They're pretty nice. You've got a fair few different parts to build some slightly different versions of the Mariner that aren't necessarily included in the instructions. The only pain point I have is that it doesn't include the earlier model engines, which were the 14 cylinders rather than the 18-cylinder engines, which they put in them later. The Australian one had the earlier 14-cylinder one. But, oh well, that's alright. You can still either scratch build one or replace it with spare or, yeah, whatever. There's ways to get around that, but it would have been nicer if they still included it. But it's nice they've got the Australian decals. It's good that they've got the masks and, like I said, good-looking details. I'm really looking forward to sharing a video on this kit when it is finished. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this little inbox review and got something out of it. If you did, please be sure to leave a like. And feel free to leave any questions or other stuff in the comment section down below. Big shout out, as always, to my wonderful patrons for helping me fund buying this kit. And also to Tectonic Hobbies, who, well, where I work at, and I got a slight discount of about 15%. Anyways, thanks again, and until the next video, model on.